her upper lip, she was talking like this all the time. The way she walked, everything she took into account. Her lips were placed a little bit high, so that space between the upper lip and the nose, as she felt, was too short after Twiggy, like a broken doll kind of a pose when Marilyn was posing. Hello guys, today we're gonna talk about myths about Marilyn Monroe look. Something that not everybody knows. Yeah, you know, some people say, she's the most beautiful woman in the world. How could she ever suffer? How could she ever think that she's not beautiful? How could she ever worry about how she looks? She was worried a lot about her look. She had a lot of attention on her body. She had a lot of attention on her face. Yes, she knew the camera. She knew every her angle, every her muscle of her face, of her eyes, of her lips, of her cheeks, of her arms, and her whole body. The way she walked, everything she took into account. She was aware about each part of her body. Of course, that's a little bit of training, and then she would look in the mirror for a long time and she would just basically play and see her best angles. First, let's talk about proportions. Her proportions were not classic. Some people said Marilyn Monroe had like ideal proportions. Of course, we're not talking anything ideal here on my channel because ideal doesn't exist. But what if we use the word moderate? Moderate in everything. Moderate was Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly is a classic body type. She was moderate. Marilyn Monroe was not moderate. Her proportions were not even. And what is proportions in the body? It's not the length of your legs comparing to your friends. It's the length of your legs comparing to the legs of your own torso, comparing to the length of your neck, of your head, of your arms, and so on. So it's just length and width of parts of your body within one body. This is proportions. So her proportions were, she had shorter legs comparing her to her torso. She had bigger head comparing to the rest of her body. Check this picture. That's Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell. Jane Russell is soft dramatic, Marilyn Monroe is romantic. So you can see Jane Russell is also a soft woman and curvy woman. But Jane Russell, she has a different kind of proportions. She is elongated and sometimes her head even looks smaller than Marilyn's, but she's taller than Marilyn. So you can see, you can compare those proportions. And this is one of the reasons why Marilyn Monroe, she looked actually smaller than she actually was, because her head was bigger. And normally kids' heads are very big comparing to their bodies. Their bodies are tiny. She had many insecurities. First of all, she thought that she has wide wrists. So every time she would pose for a picture, she would try to make her wrists like this or like this, slightly angled, make her hand like this, make her hand like this, just to make those wrists look smaller. She didn't like that part of her hand. She thought that it's too wide. Another insecurity, that she had big ears. I never noticed that before I found out about it. I don't think she has any problems with her ears, but this is one of the reasons why she would never open her ears. She would always have some hair covering them. Her chin. In a model agency, they called her chinless goddess or chinless queen or something like this. So they said she didn't have any chin. However, her chin was slightly elongated here on the bottom, but it wasn't prominent enough. Then they made a surgery for her. They implanted some kind of sponge here. Before 2013, the documents about her plastic surgeries were not kind of opened for public, so we didn't know about every procedure that she did. You can find videos about the very thorough explanation of what happened. I will just tell you in general. So they put some kind of an implant here, so it would be more pointed, more kind of forward a little bit. So it would be a little bit more strong, and then here, that skin also would be slightly tight forward here. Because at the same time, her lips were placed in between her nose and the bottom of the chin. Her lips were placed a little bit high, too high. So that space between the upper lip and the nose, as she felt, was too short. So when she was smiling, her nose would almost touch her upper lip. So in that Blue Book model agency where she was, I think when she was 19 years old, they taught her how to smile. So at the beginning, she smiled differently. She smiled with her kind of upper teeth opened and lower teeth closed, and then she would have very deep lines here. Her top lip would almost touch the nose, and the chin would look too big, too elongated. So basically the mouth placement was a little bit too high, so she didn't like it. They had to teach her how to smile differently. And she also felt like her nose was too wide when she was smiling. So later she also did the surgery for the nose. As I remember, there was even 2 surgeries, like they made it slightly smaller, but the changes were so tiny you couldn't almost see this, but you know, several millimeters here and there already can make a lot of difference. So they taught her how to smile. So she was basically smiling more with her lower, opening her lower teeth like this, and not kind of opening too much of her top teeth. Placement of her mouth when she was smiling on her face was more down, was more in the middle between the end of her chin and the tip of her nose. So basically slightly like this. And also maybe you can notice, especially in the earlier movies, when she was talking, or not even talking, just looking, her upper lip, she was talking like this all the time. Maybe that was her acting teacher, Natasha Lytes, told her to do that, because it was approximately that period of time when she worked with her on earlier movies when she was doing this. I'm not sure, but maybe Marilyn herself, she had a lot of attention. When she talks, when she smiles, her mouth would go up again, and then her chin would be bigger and her mouth would be closer to the shadow from her nose. She didn't want that. So she wanted that part under her nose to be light and big. And also she would like to overdraw her lips too. So that already occupied some space here. So that's why she was talking like this all the time, because she wanted not only to be like sensitive lips, but also she wanted to place her lips basically lower like this. And this is why she was talking like this. And even sometimes when she was not talking, she would do like this. So when she was doing this, her muscles of her lips were pulling her top lip down, and actually what it did also, it would shrink her nose. So that, because that muscle would pull her nose down and her nose would be a little bit smaller like this. So that's what she was doing. So, and then when she was smiling, when she was talking, she was trying to actually smile and talk with her opened lower teeth. So this is how she was trying to place her mouth down there. When she was doing later movies, Some Like It Hot, for example, or Let's Make Love, she has already much more relaxed mouth. And I also noticed that it's, as far as that was closer to the 60s, the lips were not so overdrawn anymore. So she still had red lips. We still didn't go to that pale lipstick as we have in the 60s, but still the lips were much calmer. She would not overdraw them that much as in the beginning of the 50s. So as far as that was the case, so she could kind of relax her mouth a little bit, so that space would be enough. Her lips didn't look too high on her face, so the chin would look normal at that time. So she started talking normal. Another insecurity of her was that she had pigmentation. So in some pictures you can see a lot of freckles on her arms. Now it looks beautiful, and some people even try to fake those freckles. Those years, that was a big no-no. So she was trying to bleach them with a cream, or they were retouching the photos to actually smoothen the skin color here on her arms. And she was trying to hide herself from the sun too. And she had those pigmentations on her face as well. So she was using sometimes whitening and bleaching cream on her face. And she was using a hormonal cream on her face, so sometimes she had this small hair that was growing here, very, very soft white hair was growing here on the sides of her face, and she didn't want to shave it off because she said that it gave her that glow on her skin on the pictures, and in the movies it looked beautiful. But I'm sure you probably know about this because this information is everywhere. She had different eyes also. One of her eyes was slightly closed sometimes, and the other eye was more opened. So you can see this sometimes when she's smiling. So she would close her eyes like this so they would look more even, or open them like this, very big. And then she would lift her brows up and then kind of make the lid's skin tighter a little bit. And she would look like this. So her eyes were even. And then later she stopped bothering. So she was like smiling like this. That was even cute and very cool. Now for the walk, many people were talking about her famous walk in Niagara Falls movie when she was moving her hips very much. So people said that she shortened one of her heels on her shoes, and then this is how she was training this. And right now there's information that she didn't do this. She put a bottle in between her thighs, and this is how she was walking, and she was training her walk. And I understand why she was doing this, because also her legs, they were slightly curved. They had a little curve by the knee, and her knee was kind of slightly turned over to the center. You know, some women, they have this structure of their legs when they're standing straight and they put their feet straight like this. I had this similar situation, for example, but it's just I'm narrower. The length of my limbs is different. I'm a bit shorter. So in my case, it looks a bit different. So when we put fit like this, and then we relax our legs, our bottom legs are slightly curved and the knees are slightly turned to the center. And Marilyn knew that. So what it did, it created slightly wider silhouette. If she would stand straight like this, with her feet like this, that would create slightly wider silhouette, and she didn't like this, she didn't want this. Also, in those old times, that was just that basic rule, how models should pose for the photos, for the films. You know, all these irregular shapes, all this curved spine and that relaxed body, that all happened more after the 60s, after Twiggy, like a broken doll kind of a pose. When Marilyn was posing, that was definitely femininity at the first place, so she had to be like a figure 8, and her legs, basically what happened was there was chest, then waist, then hips, and then that had to go down there. So when we go closer to the knees to have to be whether very close to each other or they have to be one in front of each other. So this is basically how she would stand. And also she would turn her feet slightly outwards to create that very narrow silhouette at the bottom part of her legs, and then her feet kind of were going apart, slightly like a mermaid tail or something like this. So that was very beautiful. So every time she was standing straight, so in order not to look bulky, or in order her legs would not look thick and wide, that's what she would do. She would try to make one knee in front of another knee and kind of connect the calves, make them one line, and then turn the feet outwards. Or if that wasn't the case, then she would put one leg in front of another leg with the same idea. And then she was trying to kind of connect her knees a little bit so they would be in the same line in front of the camera. So that spot would be as narrow as possible. So after you go hips, and then as narrow as possible at the knees. So that was the idea of how to pose for women at that time, and also for Marilyn, just to make herself more delicate looking and more graceful. And also what she would do, she would kind of bend her knees a little bit. So her knees would look like they're kind of creating that X legs instead of curved legs. Even when she was running, she would actually bend her knees a little bit, so they would be together, you know, like this. A little. Because if she would go like that, that would be a little bit more angular, you know. She always knew where her knees are, and it doesn't matter where the camera was, so she always knew how exactly. So she was even walking like this, trying to keep her knees together and slightly bended, and from the knees then her legs would go out. This is why sometimes her hips would be like this, because in order to keep your knees together, then you have to lift those bones too. She did have a couple of surgeries of her nose, I think, or just one, but they made just her nose slightly smaller here in this side. But also it wasn't super thin. It wasn't very sharp. They didn't do it dramatically, just a little bit. But she still felt like it was too big and it was too wide, especially when she was smiling. So she would still contour it right here, not on the nostrils. She would leave the nostrils like this, and she would contour it right here and make this kind of circle around here. She never did surgery for her boobs. It's just they were different size. It was depending on which period she had in her life. She was gaining weight, she was losing weight, so because of that, her boob size was changing, especially closer to the 60s, closer to her death. We can see that her boobs are actually getting pretty much smaller than before. And also she would use pads to make them look bigger. So the pads were in a bra normally, and that was normal at that time. Now teeth. In Blue Book agency documents, they said that she had very beautiful natural white smile. However, in some pictures we sometimes can see that her teeth are slightly yellower when she has very, very white and bleached skin. So comparing to this skin, we can see slightly yellower teeth. And also she had like a warm lipstick, so that was a bit too warm for her, so it looked slightly yellower. They said that she had wrong bite. Basically her lower teeth were much more in the back and her front teeth were more forward. So she changed her bite, so she would have this Hollywood smile. So the teeth would be like closer together. So the bottom teeth would be closer to her top teeth. So she had very curly hair, and her natural color was chestnut brown or something like this. And then in this Blue Book agency, they wanted to use her for shampoo advertisements. So for that, they needed her to straighten her hair and to lighten it. And at first she didn't want to do this. She didn't want to damage her hair, but then she decided, okay, we will do this. And then they lightened it just a little bit and made it more like a honey blonde. And for some time she was with longer hair, and they straightened it a little bit so that was curved just on the bottom, and then she would do this advertisement. Some people say she can't have blue eyes because in so many pictures there her eyes look dark. It's just because she had blue eyes, but they were just dark blue. They were just not icy blue, they were not light blue. So sometimes when there was very bright light, you could actually see the pupil there and lighter eyes. But normally when she would have her eyes half closed, especially with those longer lashes, that would give that shadow, and then that blue color, even with bright light, that would still look darker, on a darker side, so you couldn't sometimes recognize the blue itself in there. Now in Blue Book Models agency, she was there when she was 19 years old, and they have documents about her parameters, and actually she wasn't that tiny. She wasn't 162 centimeters like many people say. In that agency it said she was 5'6", 1 meter 67 centimeters. 5'6", not 5'2", not 5'3", but 5'6". She was size 12. Her bust was 36, her waist was 24, and her hips were 34. It was just exactly at that moment when she was there, when she was 19. Of course, the parameters are changing if you're gaining weight or losing weight. Also, in that Blue Book agency, they said that she has too round face. So in order to make this face more elongated, they had to straighten her hair, especially for this shampoo advertisement. So at first she didn't want to do this, but then she agreed. Now she was wearing a wig in the Misfits. You can see this is a wig, and I didn't know that before. I thought it was her hair, but they just decided that she would wear a wig, and so that would always look kind of same for the same scenes. But she wasn't bald, and she didn't have problem with her hair like some people say. No, it was just, as I understand, for the scenes, because they were filming in different days and she just had to look same in the same scenes. She hated darker roots, so she always was bleaching them, like, as I heard, each week or each 2 weeks. Also, they say that her scalp was very oily, so she would normally wash her hair every day. And her hair was very hard to handle, so they had to first straighten it and then curl it the way they wanted. Which I can understand, because her natural hair was very, very curly, starting from the very root. So it already had its own direction and they were pretty strong. So it was really hard to make the curls look exactly like they wanted it to look, like more glamorous. Also, what they did, with a laser, they made her hairline more tight and like more tidy, kind of that widow peak here. So as I understand, they made her forehead bigger with that slightly, and just made it tidier line, I think. Also, many people say she invented that look, that was Marilyn Monroe look. Of course, she had her own secrets, and her makeup artists also, they had their own secrets about how to make her particular makeup, and then everybody started copying her. But at that time, it was normal to have this type of makeup, this type of hair, and this type of poses when they were making pictures. For example, Betty Brosnan. She was not as famous as Marilyn, but at that time, you can just see how similar that is. So Marilyn, of course, she was copying somebody at that time, as everybody probably. So she was going in trend, she was trying this or that thing, and they chose something that really worked exactly for her. And then later on, probably she kind of evolved her own style, because it was already the image of Marilyn Monroe. And also Marilyn said that she had makeup of Greta Garbo, and she and Greta Garbo have absolutely different eyes. Marilyn had more hooded eyes. I'm not sure if she did that surgery of removing some skin here, but definitely at the beginning, she had that skin on her eyelids. So they were drawing, actually contouring her eyes to look a little bit more like Greta Garbo's. So she would close her eyes a little bit and she would have that rounded lid. Yeah, she was copying the makeup from Greta Garbo, especially at the beginning. But it just looked very different on Marilyn, because Greta Garbo, she's dramatic. She has absolutely different vibe. She's elongated, sharp, and angular, and Marilyn is on contrary. She's very soft, rounded, and small. So because of that, they look completely different. And then that makeup looks more gentle on Marilyn rather than dramatic. And then her makeup artist also said that they wanted Marilyn's brows to occupy a bit more space on her forehead, because her forehead was slightly large, and so they were elongating this and making this triangle shape to occupy the space and kind of repeat that triangles on her widow's peak here, and then they were elongated the liner, so again to occupy that wide face, a wide forehead area. Also, if as far as Marilyn Monroe very often had pretty light skin, so her makeup artist Alan Snyder, he would add a little bit of the white clown makeup into her foundation, Max Factor foundation, because Max Factor foundation, the color of it was slightly rosy, slightly pinkish. I heard also from some color analysis that she is clear spring, if we talk about 12 seasons. Let me know what you think about it. I personally think that she looks amazing in very bright colors, like that orange dress, remember in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes? That's a good test for me on one hand. On the other hand, she definitely made her hair platinum blonde, which freshens the look and increasing the contrast of a person very much. Also, her eyes were blue, but they were dark blue, so she could actually pull out some darker colors as well. Hard to tell unless you see a very good quality picture. Yeah, so those are the interesting things that I wanted to tell you about Marilyn. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments if you found out something new. Also, subscribe to this channel, click on the bell not to miss my future videos. Also, you can subscribe on my Patreon. I'm gonna leave the link down below, or you can click the button join here. This way you will be my sponsor and it will help me so much to keep doing these videos. Thank you so much and bye-bye.